In this video, we're going to be doing our starts of the week for week 2 of the NFL season. And we're also going to give you guys a couple dudes that we're pretty scared of for this week alone. Spencer, welcome back, man. We have a little bit of a disclaimer for you guys. For our starts of the week, what we thought would be a good idea is that we'll give you guys that are maybe drafted after like the 6th or 7th round or something, so that these are dudes that you might be already at a crossroads on whether or not you should be starting them. So it makes it a little bit more interesting. I mean, if you have T Higgins, you're starting T Higgins, right? So and then for the guys that we're scared of for week 2, we thought to include only guys that were drafted in the first 5 or 6 rounds. So kind of an inverse thing there, where these are guys that you probably drafted early and you maybe have no choice to start, and these are dudes that we're a little bit worried about. So Spencer, you want to start first, man? Give me your start of the week. Let me know who you have a lot of confidence in week 2.
Yeah, man, definitely. I have a homer, someone that I picked up late last season that showed some speed because his name is Rashid Shaheed, and I got a need for speed. He is an interesting play because Derek Carr hasn't really had those weapons around him. Granted, he had Amari Cooper at one point, he had Devontae Adams, but he's never had that three wide receiver set that he can kind of trust every player. Maybe Hunter Renfro to a certain degree, but never at this level. So I think Derek Carr is only going to improve. They're playing Carolina. So I've got Rashid Shaheed as a very interesting high upside flex play where you don't necessarily need him to score a touchdown because he's going to go for a ton of yards.
Yeah, I think it's a good play. He looked really good last week, and I do think that Derek Carr is definitely serviceable. He just seems to struggle in the red zone, and Shaheed is not a red zone target. He's a guy that can score from the other side of the field, which is what you want, in a Derek Carr offense. That's a good one. I'll give you mine now. So I am going to the over under well, meaning I like to find games with high over unders according to Vegas. And I like just essentially cherry picking players from those games. Obviously, Chiefs versus Jags. It's expected to be a shootout. Obviously, you're going to be starting Calvin Ridley. You're going to be starting, Travis Kelce if he plays. But a nugget that I think should be good this week is Christian Kirk. Now, I know a lot of people are a little bit down on him. He had a pretty decrepit week 1, but he was very productive last season. He slots instantly down to the number 2 guy because of Ridley's presence. But I do think that in a high over under, and after a game in which Kirk really didn't do much, I'm not going to say it's a greasy wheel situation, but I will say the Jags might make it a point to spread the ball around a little bit more, because it was a pretty intense funnel right into Ridley. So we'll see if I think there's some opportunity there. Potentially, the Chiefs taking away Ridley or trying to double cover him could open things up for Kirk underneath. So that's my guy. And Spencer, who do you got? Who's your second guy? We're gonna do like 3 each, so
Yeah,
gonna zig
yeah,
it.
I will say that's a good strategy looking at the over unders and also thinking about the defense who's covering who. Keep that in mind. I'm going to
Yeah.
switch it up position wise and I'm going with a quarterback. I know this is a spicy take, but I'm going with Mac Jones. The reason being is this week, I think looking at his history, was the most fantasy points he's ever scored. Now, is he going to do that every single week? Probably not. But he's against Miami, and we saw that Miami versus Los Angeles Chargers game, and it was a shootout. I don't think it's going to be quite as high scoring, but we might see Mac Jones, let the ball loose downfield again. So I think it's a good start of the week to maybe repeat some of this, not quite to the level. Again, he went for like a personal best fantasy points, but could be a nice plug and play if you're not feeling super strong with your quarterback, or have an injury at quarterback or something like an Aaron Rodgers type. Yeah, plug in Mac Jones over Zach Wilson for sure, for example. So yeah, go out and get Mac Jones. He might be available on your waiver wire even.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is just the presence of like Zeke, but I mean, it concerns me very little. I think Ramondre is such a receiving threat that he could score, and all of his receiving touchdowns go to Mac Jones. So
Yeah,
I
we
think,
even saw Zeke catching a few balls, even though he
yeah,
like bobbled one of those. But yeah,
yeah,
definitely interesting play I think for week 2 against the
yeah,
Dolphins.
I like it. And my next guy is actually from a game with a not considerably lower over under, but one of the lower over unders on the slate. And it's Colts at Texans, and it's Nico Collins. So with the 39.5 over under, with the Colts favored by 1 point, so it's essentially a pick 'em. That's the way I see that. Um, Nico Collins is somebody that really surprised me in week one. He had one of the highest first read percentages from week one, meaning he was the first read on during each play. So that's what you like to see from like a true number one alpha type wide receiver. Seems he's the alpha there, and he also had quite a lot of air yards, which is something that you also like in a pick. So the Colts have the number one rush defense after week one. I know that's not a lot of data, but so far they are the number one rushing defense by PFF. So if the Texans want to hold court with the Colts, they're going to have to throw the ball. So I think Nico Collins would be the first beneficiary of that. And I know it's not the spiciest pick. He's probably going to be started by most people after his target share from week one. But if you're concerned about the low over under or the Colts being a good defense, just know that they seem to be a rush funnel, or sorry, a pass funnel, meaning the rush defense is very strong. Spencer, give me your third guy.
Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. I think going off of week one, but going into my third pick again, another spicy quarterback pick, another Jones. This one's Daniel Jones. Maybe this is unheard of given how the performance was against Dallas, but it was also super rainy. They got off to just such a odd start with the the block into a touchdown with just right out the gate. It really put them in a behind state, and they just couldn't get anything going. I don't think this is like the typical floor for Daniel Jones. We've seen what he can do last year, and again, I don't think he's like going to be a top 10 option the entire season long. But he's against Arizona. Arizona is not a good team. Daniel Jones is going to have a bounce back week. He's a good starter for this week, but again, long term, it's not someone I'm going to trust week in, week out. But we can't look at week one in a vacuum and say that's his floor. I think that's his basement. That's like subterranean core of the earth type fantasy points. So yeah, have some confidence with Daniel Jones in week two against Arizona.
Yeah, I like it. I'm like trying to find ways to pick holes as you were saying all that. I'm like, oh man, but what if it turns into a blowout? Because it is the Cardinals. They're liable to just be dog water any given week. But yeah, I think it's a good pick. I think even if it is a blowout, 3/4 of them just getting pounded, that's enough for Daniel Jones to be productive
I
on the
think
week.
I'll tag on one thing that I didn't bring up. He's got the rushing upside. Even in a game where it was a slip and slide rainy mess, he still went for 13 attempts on the ground and he went for 43 yards.
It's a nice
So,
floor.
I mean, he's going to get you rushing upside and possibly a rushing touchdown. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a good option week 2.
Yeah, I like it. I think actually a nice chance of a rushing touchdown, assuming the Cardinals are very weary of Saquon and kind of stuff the box on Saquon. There's a lot of potential for some like play action rushing TDs. But anyway, I'll hit you with my last one. This one comes from the Dolphins at Patriots game. So I'm going to the same game that you chose from with a 46.5 over under. Another shootout is expected, or at least hopefully to a similar level, right? I don't think we're going to get a 65 point or 60, what was it, 69 point combined total from that game. But anyway, my guy is
Nice.
actually Hunter Henry. um, Choosing a tight end as a start of the week is a risky maneuver. It's definitely a recipe to fail in my opinion, but um, Hunter Henry has one of the top tight end matchups according to PFF on the week, because it seems he's going to be defended by Jerome Baker, who just got absolutely lit up by your fucking boy Donald Parham last week.
Put some
Parham, dude.
respect on Parham's name, bro.
Dude, I have so much respect for him. His name is auto caps locked in my phone because every time I say his name, I scream it. Yeah, so it's a nice game and it's a nice matchup, right? And Hunter Henry was the tight end one last week, so
I mean, also a former Charger, Hunter Henry. So yeah, I can say, I mean, that guy looked insanely good on the Chargers. I was sad when we had to let him go, and he never quite returned to form. Maybe this is a year where he has like a bit of a bounce back and is like a top 5 option in terms of the long term of the
yeah,
season. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Have some confidence starting
yeah,
Hunter Henry this week.
dude. Talent was never his issue. It's just he went to the Patriots, who
Yeah.
You just never know how they're going to use players when it comes to fantasy. They
Definitely.
don't use players based on fantasy. They're kind of like Arthur Smith in that regard. So those are our starts of the week, guys. Hope those help you. We're going to keep a little season long tally if we do these starts of the week all season, and we're going to see who comes out on top at the end of the season. So we're now going to give you guys our list. We got 4 names for you guys of guys that we're pretty nervous about. And these are guys that were drafted in, we're going to say the first 6 rounds because they all fall within that region. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce each of them. So the first one on our list is Terry McLaurin. And just to give you the an idea of Terry McLaurin. So I don't know how you feel about him, Spencer. I don't know what your temperature was on him pre-season. But I was not a big Terry McLaurin fan. I've never been a big Terry McLaurin fan. And now you pair that with the fact that he had a turf toe issue or some type of toe issue. I don't know if it was officially turf toe. But yeah, that's concerning. And you also combine that with the fact that Dotson has really emerged going back to last season. He's one of the top young wide receiver talents in the league. And in week 1, we also saw Curtis Samuel lead the team in yardage and like in production in general. And Curtis Samuel's just doing Curtis Samuel things, man. He shows up every season just to ruin our Terry McLaurin shares. So, what do you think? Any more thoughts on McLaurin there?
Yeah, I think you hit all the points. The only thing I'll pile on is that he's been a perennial wide receiver too, except for last year. It shows in half PPR he finished 14. I think that's an outlier, especially because Sam Howell's at QB. Not to diss Sam Howell, I mean he could be fairly good moving forward, but I don't think that they've had great QB play in Washington for a long time. So, yeah, for all the points that you listed, and he's just been that perennial like wide
Yeah,
receiver 2 guy. I'd rather look elsewhere for, a sneaky waiver wire pickup or something over Terry McLaurin.
yeah, and I think there's a lot of Terry McLaurin truthers out there, and anytime I disparage him, I get just absolutely roasted. But I've just never been a big fan, man. And you could say it's because he's never had a quarterback, sure, but I don't really give a shit, dude. I just care about the production, right? Like
Yeah, I
you
just
can,
think that there's certain wide receivers that can excel without a quarterback, and he's
yeah,
not one of them. Guys like DeAndre Hopkins or whatnot, where it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball.
yeah,
Mike
and
Evans.
and people say,
Um,
oh, dude, but he's been a 1K receiver I don't care about being a 1K
he's,
receiver if,
you know what? Here's what he is, bro. He's a DJ Moore.
yeah,
DJ
mid,
Moore is the same thing. A
forever
wide
mid,
receiver
dude, perma
too.
mid.
People love to draft him very highly. Same thing going here. He's like DJ Moore in Chicago. Not that we're
Yeah.
going to talk about DJ Moore, but he was almost on the list. In
Yeah.
Chicago. Anyway, who else do we have on
Well,
the
you
people we're
take the
avoiding?
next one, dude, because this one's yours. So, Joe
I
Burrow.
don't know why. I like the spicy QB picks, man. So I'm gonna say Joe Burrow. I'm not saying long term. I'm not saying Joe Burrow is washed. I'm not saying that anything, grandstanding hot take. But for week 2 specifically, I am looking elsewhere at QB other than Joe Burrow. People think he's just going to bounce back immediately. He's going to put up 30 points. I don't see that happening against the Baltimore Ravens. It definitely could happen, but I don't see it. I would look elsewhere at QB if you have that depth. If you have another startable QB that you want to plug and play and swap out with Joe Burrow, I think maybe the calf injury is like lingering. He missed camp. He's not clicking with his team. Obviously, the Browns look good on defense, but Baltimore Ravens also look good on defense. So I don't know. It's a little bit riskier because you drafted him so highly, and he is like one of the stars of the league. So it's hard to make that week to week decision to have him sit. But I don't know. Maybe consider it.
You sure you're not just a Justin Herbert fan and you're just a Joe Burrow hater?
I literally have Joe Burrow in our league. That's why I
Yeah.
brought it up.
Yeah.
So
I struggle to see most people benching him, to be honest.
yeah,
And some counterpoints or some devil's advocate points that I can bring up is like, okay, but the Ravens did play Texans, who should be like the basement dwellers of the NFL this season. So it's difficult to really, if the verdict is out, or the verdict is still out on whether or not the Ravens are a good defense. But I will say, um, how rusty he looked is concerning. He
yeah.
really looked pretty bad,
I-
right?
I'll 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 summarize it as this. I think that he's not going to go for 3 points like he did, but he's also not going to go for 30.
Yeah.
So if he ends up with 12 or 13 points, aren't you going to be pretty upset that you could have just started like a Mac
I
Jones
think even
for just
sub
this
20,
week
you're
and got?
sad. I think
That's what
even
I'm saying.
17, you're sad with where you
Right.
drafted him in the fourth round. Look,
Exactly. So I
yeah,
mean, I'd rather start someone with a little bit higher upside with a, for
yeah.
just a week to play. So,
Yeah, quarterback is one of the more matchup influenced positions, right? I mean, we saw Jalen Hurts go for 12 fantasy points last week. I mean, the top fantasy quarterbacks were like Tua, Mac Jones, Anthony Richardson. So just because you have an elite guy that you drafted high doesn't mean you can't still play matchups. And the next guy on our list is a man that I drafted in our league, who I have been high on all offseason. I thought I had the best team in the league up until the fucking first kickoff. I instantly realized I have the worst team in the league because Drake London is somebody that I'm very very concerned about, not just for this week but season long. Basically, we have a litmus test the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks for me. I don't know how much leash I want to give Drake London, but week two is a concerning prospect considering the fact that he will be seeing a lot of Jair Alexander most likely. Pair that with the fact that the Falcons don't seem like they have any interest in throwing the ball. They will they will run the ball until they're on the plane going back to Atlanta. And even if they're losing, even if it's a negative game script, we saw last year that they still had no issues running the ball. They had no problem running it first, second, and on third and long, running it again and going, and punting. So I think we might see a lot of the same. I'm just praying that the Green Bay Packers run the fucking score up so that they can't run the ball, and we'll see. Maybe we can see a little bit more Drake London, but I'm very concerned about his workload. And yeah, I mean, he's got to get more than one target, dude. That's as simple as it is.
yeah, I don't really have anything to add on Drake London specifically, but I want to tease out a quote that maybe applies to sit starts in general for people moving forward. Is you talked about, giving him a leash and how long you want that leash to be. So I think people need to think about sit starts in that way, where it's like players that are drafted in the later rounds, they're already bench players. You're not really making those types of decisions, but once you get up into those upper echelons of rounds, like a round one guy, you're giving him a long leash because you spent that draft capital. So it's almost mimics, actual NFL teams where you take a high draft capital guy, you're going to give him a few weeks, maybe by week 4, you're like, okay, they're really not performing. Like I need to pivot. So I think that's where it separates the, veterans from the rookie fantasy football players, where you can kind of identify that 1 week early, where you can say, like, here, I'll give an example. One year DeAndre Hopkins had a really down year, and Melvin Gordon had just started emerging as the lead back in San Diego at the time, Los Angeles Chargers, and I flipped
San
DeAndre
Diego.
Hopkins for Melvin Gordon, right, which seemed crazy because DeAndre Hopkins was my first round pick, and Melvin Gordon was like a fifth or fourth round pick. I don't know. I don't remember. But at the time, it was scary because it's like, am I just selling my team away like this is my first rounder? But in the end, Hopkins ended up underperforming all year. Gordon emerges as the lead back and actually, made the playoffs that year. So that's an idea just to throw out there of like understanding when to, cut that
Yeah.
leash and say cut ties and let's move
You know what I'll
on,
say
try and make a
though?
trade.
I'll say that the real like top G's, real Andrew Tates of fantasy football, or just investing in general, are the
Yeah.
people who can like set aside their biases or their like
Their
emotional
emotions.
attachment and be like, dude, this week, let me give you a proposition or a scenario. Let's say you won the fucking Puka Nakua sweepstakes. Would you start him over Drake London this week against the Niners? Over
1000%.
Drake London.
1000%.
Okay.
Why?
That's
As much
rough.
as I like Drake London, I have, dynasty leagues. Puka Nakua, he looked like Cooper Cup incarnate. He's going to get a million targets, a bunch of receptions, even if he doesn't score. I don't care how good the 49ers defense is.
Yeah.
He's going to get his.
Okay. I mean, hey, that's a bold
Add it as another start,
bold take,
bro. Add
Con.
it
Let's
on
see
the.
if it works out.
Hey, I'll
Yeah.
keep the receipts.
Listen, you're probably going to end up being right simply because Stafford's better than Ritter. The Rams are down to throw it. Yeah, you could come up with a bunch of reasons. I think you'll end up being right there. But that's so sad, dude. That's so sad because I drafted him in like the 6th round, expecting him to. I was expecting him to take that next step and be like a second rounder next season, the way Amon Ross St. Brown did.
Yeah. I think it's tough too because you can't really move him. When a
Yeah,
guy
you
puts up
can't.
a goose egg, you can't be like, "Oh, let me try and get value." Everyone's gonna
No.
try and buy low on you. So ideally, he performs at some point and you can move off of him at that time. But
I think
um,
week 1
probably
though,
bag holding all year.
yeah, dude, the problem with week 1 is that, like, that shit sticks, dude. If somebody lays a fat goose week 1, you tend to remember the week 1 or week 6 or championship week performances, right? And, like, he
Yeah,
can he can pop off the next 4 weeks, and if I try to trade him to somebody for, like, a decent value, they'd still be like, "Hmm, but he's liable to goose anytime."
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No matter how many, how many weeks he performs well, it's gonna be tough to move off him. Yeah.
exactly. So, Drake London, sad to see it, but I would be sitting him if I had a better option. Let's say you had Michael Thomas on the bench and you just have a flex spot to fill, and Drake London was in that flex. I might be replacing him with Michael Thomas this week. And our last guy on the list is Najee Harris. Spencer, take it away, dude. Tell me why Najee Harris is a sit this week.
Yeah, I think again the key point here is this week. They're against the Cleveland Browns. They were, looking good against uh, Cincinnati, and they're just coming off a absolute terrible game against San Francisco. He only had a 52% snap count. Had 6 rushing attempts, only 2 receptions. So I don't see this game script going in their favor, where they're going to be running a ton. I'm not saying that Najee year long is, a bad player. It's just a rough start for the season, but it does loosen up a little bit with their schedule. So, yeah, for
Could be a
just
trade
this week,
target.
good trade target for sure. Buy low on
Wait
Najee
after
Harris, I
this
think.
week. Wait for him to shit
Yeah,
the bed one more week, and then
one more week. Yeah,
yeah,
because I think in general, I know we're kind of talking about sit starts for players, but to add a little fantasy nugget as well is that people don't want to trade week one. They don't want to give up on players. They want to see them a little more data. So I
yeah.
think week
Investment
3,
paralysis, dude.
exactly. After that week 2 matchup, they're like, okay, I'm 0-2. I need to make moves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because in fantasy, dude, if you start the season 0-2, dude, you could just smell the desperation on those. Like, I, s-
exactly.
I'd send a DM, dude, instantly gets read. Like they're just in the app always refreshing, looking at the draft.
What
Yeah,
do you
man.
think though about Najee? Anything to add or?
Yeah, I mean, they play the Browns, who they just took a massive shit all over the Bengals. Chalk that up to Russ. Chalk that up to whatever you want to chalk it up to. At the end of the day, the Browns did look very dominant. So that is not the team you want to be seeing if you're the Steelers. And I think they just lost one of their offensive tackles to the Steelers, or maybe even their center. I don't know. Um, yeah, somebody important just got injured. I'm forgetting who the name is escaping me, but it's bad news. Kenny Pickett definitely did not look like the second coming. He didn't look like the third coming or the fourth coming. He
In
wasn't coming
preseason,
at
he
all.
did when he was against plumbers and electricians and
Blacksmiths and
yeah.
apothecaries and
But
yeah,
that's why you can't take, to take preseason. You got to take it with a grain of salt and go off the past data of the actual like NFL season.
yeah, exactly, man. Don't get too hype. Preseason doesn't really matter very much. I would say like maybe the first game, maybe like the first quarter of the first game matters a little. Other than that, doesn't
It
matter much.
matters more for rookies,
Yeah,
guys coming into the league and camp
like
hype
depth
and
depth pieces.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So guys, hope this video helped you guys. Hope these sits and or starts and sits, I guess what we'll be calling them. Hope they helped you guys. If they did help, why don't you give us a sub? Hit the comments, dude. Tell us where you disagree. All you Terry McLaurin lovers, if you, if you, I know you guys are already in the comments talking shit.
Bro, my spicy QB takes. People think I hate Joe Burrow, that he's the worst ever. I'm ready for the I'm ready for the
Ready for the
flames.
spice, dude.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks for being here. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.